This is an example of what the systems are going to look like. This is actually 150 holes. So your systems are going to be twice this size. Okay? They're roughly about 20 feet long. Most of y'all know this because I sent out the measurements to you guys, 4 feet by 20 feet, to have the space to put it. We like this design mainly because, I'm going to go into this at the end, mainly because it's very adaptable. Okay, you can kind of expand onto it, add onto it, and also change how you want to lay it out. I'm not going to waste a lot of time on definitions. Google is your friend. If you want to define hydroponics, put hydroponics in Google, all kinds of definitions are going to come up. But the main thing is that we are growing plants without soil. Generally, this can go from someone who's doing a small system, backyard system, all the way up to commercial. It is the same hydroponics. It's the same principles. So what's changing is really the designs, okay? We generally know why we're interested in hydroponics, because we can grow anywhere that we want to. We're not limited by the quality of the soil or how much land you have or things like that. So whether you want to set it up actually on land, whether you want to set up on the rooftop of a building, whether you want to set up on the wall of a building, whether you want to set up in your patio, you're not limited by what space you have. But the biggest issue that we have with hydroponics is, of course, it is very, very technical. Okay? If you want to get into hydroponics, you need to have a good system. Usually what happens is that people go onto YouTube, they don't have any training, they just see something that looks like it's working, and YouTube is, of course, as I like to call it, the land of lying, because basically people can put up whatever they want. Okay? They make you think that their systems are working, but they don't actually give you any training, they don't tell you how it's working, all you just see is a picture with the plants, and you hope that what they're telling you is the truth. So most hydroponic farms are failing because people are not getting the training. Okay? This is actually how I got roped into everything. I was a fish farmer and very happy to be a fish farmer. I wanted to stay there fish farming for all of my life, and then they realized that I was one of the few people that was actually trained in hydroponics and aquaponics. And as all the farms started to fail in Barbados, they asked me to step up to become the trainer. If they could send the farmers to me for me to train them so that they would then therefore be successful. We started this in 2017, and obviously it has worked. So that's why the governments are now realizing that the first step to getting any of these projects up and running is the training. We have given people free systems before in the hope that, they take the system and just run with it, and those systems have failed. If you don't give them the system with the training, a lot of them, I've said 100% of them do not make it. Okay? So training is really one of the most important things. So even if we don't get huge systems out of this project, the bigger thing we should be getting out of this project is the knowledge, the ability to train people. And with that training, you guys can then take your systems further. So obviously there are lots of advantages to hydroponics. I don't need to go through every single one. You guys can Google them as usual, but basically the biggest thing we're looking at is the more control of the farming. Okay, control of the environment. You all know that there's a lot of issues happening right now with climate change, unpredictable rain, unpredictable heat. There's no real seasons anymore, like how you could say there was a rainy season and a dry season. Hurricanes are coming whenever they feel like, it seems like now. Okay, so we're having a lot of change, and farmers and even crops cannot adapt to that change that fast. Okay, so even I'm seeing this in Barbados, that a lettuce variety I planted 2 years ago, I now cannot grow this year because of the change of temperature, right? So having a hydroponic system really gives a farmer a chance to battle against climate change, because you can control everything that's happening. So advantages and disadvantages are pretty straightforward. As I said, hydroponics, the main seller here is the control as well as the attractiveness. So remember that we're trying to get young people into farming. In Barbados, you're not going to get anybody to go outside into a field and want to do farming in the field. Those days are gone, okay? For many reasons, obviously we have the same stigmas with slavery and plantations. Okay, so most of the older generation would have encouraged their children to get out of back-breaking farm work. We are told in Barbados too, so you think you have similar things here, that farming is for the poor and the uneducated. right? Okay, so if you can't succeed in school, you can go and dig ground and plant this and do that and scrape by. And farmers are considered to be poor people, right? So a lot of things about hydroponics, aquaponics, is about changing, even just greenhouse farming, changing the image of farming within the society. Okay, it's no longer just back-breaking work that you're going to struggle every day. This is actually attractive to children when they see the hydroponic systems, when they see how they look, when they see how the vegetable looks, and also to the ease of which you can use a hydroponic system. I'm a woman. I can operate everything on a hydroponic system. Okay, you don't need to have a huge amount of muscle. And strange enough, when I started these projects in the Caribbean, I thought my biggest client or customer was going to be a young person. Strange enough, my biggest customers are old, retired pensioners. It's interesting. I did not expect that. But the main reason is that pensioners love planting. Okay, when you're done working and you're bored at home and you need something to do because the kids are grown up, you turn to plants, you take care of your plants. But the difference with hydroponics is you're not bending over to deal with the plants anymore. Everything is now within reach. Right? And I found that was very interesting. And we're actually putting systems as well as senior homes. So even though we've started with schools, it's also great for senior homes and hospitals as well. Biggest disadvantage of hydroponics is going to be the technical side. You need to get the training, and then you need the funding, the cost, okay? Because obviously you have to set up this system, and there's a capital cost up front. There are certain ways to cheat the system. That is why I'm here. I'm going to show you all the do's and don'ts, the ways you can cut that budget down, things you can use that are cheaper. But at the end of the day, the cheaper the system, maybe you're not going to get the quality that you want out of it. So investing in a good system, knowing where you can kind of cut corners and where you cannot cut corners, and making sure that you get high-end products coming off of it. I also put as a disadvantage return on investment, because we also have the opposite problem. Sometimes people bite off more than they can chew. They want the best of everything for the hydroponic system, and the capital expense becomes so high that you could actually never make that business profitable. Okay, so a lot of that happens from suppliers. You're going to have a lot of overseas suppliers trying to sell you their $50,000 high-end system. And when you put that in here in the Caribbean and it cannot make the money that you spent on it, your business is going to fail as well. So unfortunately for the hydroponics industry, there are a lot of tricksters out there. There are a lot of con artists. And this is something that we've also come to see. Because when they realize that you are in the Caribbean and they're overseas, they know that once they send it to you, it's highly unlikely that you're going to send it back. Right? Okay, so they're going to sell you a lot of things that do not work in the Caribbean, and this is part of why my association came to life, because we were tired of this. We were tired of funded projects with overseas equipment that came in and just sat down in places and got rusty. It did not work and the projects failed. Okay, so I'm going to go into some definitions so you guys kind of understand what we're talking about. So we have two types of hydroponic systems. One is liquid, one is aggregate. Liquid means that the plant is literally just floating on top of water. So there'll be something to stop it from drowning, like a styrofoam board or a plastic sheet. And aggregate systems actually have the plants in something, whether it's usually clay pebbles or stone or some kind of media, okay? To further confuse you guys now, you have either open or closed systems. So don't panic, you guys are getting copies of all of these slides, okay? But an open system is basically one that has little to no maintenance. You just kind of put the plant there, throw in the solution, and hope for the best. Very easy, because it's just a one-time thing, but you're not really monitoring anything, so a lot of things can go wrong. So that open system would work, say you are in a science class and you just want to show students something for a few weeks. You could run a little open system on a tabletop in the science, well, you all don't have science labs, but your classroom, and that would operate fine. okay? But it's not gonna work in the long term. Closed systems are where we take the nutrient solution, we add it to the plants, and then we recycle it around. We monitor it, and we keep adding nutrient as needed. So we'll be doing testing, and then over time, you will eventually have to swap out the nutrients. So most hydroponic systems that are commercial are going to be closed hydroponic systems, and that is what we will be doing. We'll be doing a closed hydroponic system, so you guys will not just be dosing the system, but you guys will be taking water quality testing on it and learn how to add nutrients and things like that. Okay. Now we can then further classify a lot of them. Passive and active systems. So passive systems, yet again, is the first one I talked about, the open system, okay, where you're just basically doing a display. You have the nutrient and the plant, and it's very simple. There's no pump, there's no equipment with a passive system. Active system, you're going to have something pumping the nutrient around. You're probably going to also have some form of aeration on your system. So we're doing a closed system for you guys, and it's also going to be an active system, because you guys are going to have a reservoir with a pump that's going to send the nutrient around to the plants, and we're also going to have aeration in your reservoirs. Are you going to work? Good. So I'm just kind of going through the different types of systems so you guys can understand them, because obviously when you are training people, you're going to choose systems based on different needs. Okay? So if it is someone who just wants to grow a few plants at home on their patio, they may not need an active system or a closed system. They can get away with something as simple as this, a wick system. Okay, where basically the plants, you sometimes, I don't know if you guys have them for sale here, but I see them in our hardware stores in Barbados. It looks almost like a planting tray. So we have like 6 or 7 sections, and you put the plants in, and at the very bottom, you just pour the nutrient in. Right, that's it. That's all you have to do, and your lettuce are going to grow, okay? So this is a simple wick system, and these are great to promote for, like I said, something to show in class, or if someone just wants something at home, like a little herb tray or kitchen garden. Then you have the ebb and flow. So this is actually one of the most popular ones that you see on YouTube. Okay, it's usually made out of like those barrels or those white ICB totes that have been cut in half, and you just see that they have all these like red clay pebbles, and they've got the plants planted in them. So basically the water is on a timer. It comes up and fills the first container it has in the plants, and then there's a siphon drain in it. So after a certain amount of time, it's going to release the water back down into the reservoir, and it's just basically a repeat all the time, okay? This is a very simple setup too. However, it has quite a few issues if you try to commercialize it. This is great for small backyard setups. But the biggest problem with the ebb and flow is, of course, this stuff in here, this media. Okay, it's quite heavy. It could even be stone or gravel sometimes, and you're going to have to wash it and clean it periodically. So if you have, a little container like this, that's straightforward. You can get a few buckets and your hose and clean it out. If you now have a 20-foot system, 1, it's going to be very heavy and difficult to clean, and 2, it's going to be very expensive because you're going to have to buy that volume of material. So ebb and flows are usually used for small backyard systems. Okay, so then deep water culture. This is actually what is more used in commercial settings. We also do this in aquaponics too. You may see it online, but it's basically when you see these long troughs of plants, and they normally have a floating styrofoam board. Okay? These boards are like, I don't know if you guys have insulation boards here, but they're usually 4 feet by 8 feet. Right? And they can basically be slid along the trough like a conveyor belt. So you can like take out one board, deal with it, and push it down and come back around, right? So these are very good for commercial settings, because if you're dealing with thousands of plants, you may not want to be harvesting them out in the sun. You can just pick up the board, carry it to your packaging area, deal with the board, and then come back. Okay, so those tend to be more of commercial setting. Whereas this is also another one, drip systems, but this one uses the NFT pipes. So you see the 4-inch pipes, PVC pipes that you'll be growing out of. I am not fond of the drip system. The drip system literally is you take the pump, the water pumps from here up, and it just kind of drips into the pipe. The reason why I don't like drip systems is that if the water stops pumping, all the water from the drip line has run out, and your plants are actually going to lose water. Right? So they're not going to be sitting in water all the time. So drip systems, if the pump fails, you may not have much time to get back to your plants before they completely dry out. Right? The more industry used one is the NFT. So NFT is basically where you have more water coming into the line. We have further adapted it and kind of crossed it with aquaponics. In the NFT, traditionally, the water never stayed in the pipe. So it also would run out like the drip system and you'd have problems. But we now have put in a standpipe drain on one end of the pipe so that the water is always in. Okay, which is important for the Caribbean, because if you have an electrical outage, if a storm is coming and the power has been cut off or things like that, the water is going to stay in the pipe. So your plants can still survive quite a few days. Even though they're not going to get the nutrients refreshed, they're going to have enough water that they're not going to dry out before you can get back to them. So what we will be doing is going to be NFT systems with the standpipe drain. Right? So you guys are going to have your NFT set up. You're going to have your reservoir, something for pumping around, a water pump, and an air pump. So this is kind of what came off of the drip system. So the drip system used to just drip water to the plants, and they've now kind of changed it to go into aeroponics, where you're misting the plants. So drip system and aeroponics are what you're kind of seeing when you see those vertical towers. Right? They'll be using either drip systems or aeroponics. So it allows you to grow the plants in all kinds of directions. Now, this is where the fun of hydroponics comes. A lot of these systems look impressive. It looks really cool when you walk into a building and there are plants going up to the ceiling. However, it actually has not been proven whether those actually make economical sense. Right? The majority of the successful farms are using NFT or they're using deep water culture. Okay, so whereas the other towers and stuff look really cool, for most people who are farmers know that lettuce has not been designed to grow sideways, right? And that is what you're doing in aquaponics. In aeroponics, you're putting the plant into the side and it's growing this way, right? So they're getting a lot of issues with the plant. So even though it looks really impressive, we're finding that it's not actually making sense economically. So usually if you're looking for success, the deep water culture and the NFT are performing the best right now. The main thing is that those nutrients work well for batch farming, which is what most people are going to do in schools. So schools, when they start up, tend to go and focus on hydroponics because it's kind of like, if you can't do A, there's no point moving on to B, right? So hydroponics is very easy for schools because you're just adding the nutrients, and when you want to shut down the system, you can shut it down and restart it. So it doesn't necessarily need to be continuously run. When you're doing something like aquaponics, you have to keep that system running every day of the year because you're dependent on live organisms, the bacteria and the fish, right? So usually schools will start with hydroponics and then you can adapt into aquaponics. I usually recommend it because when you have the aquaponics now, the nutrients are coming from a natural source. They're coming from the fish. And there are very few supplements that you're going to have to add in. And then those are pure supplements like potassium, and iron. Those are really the only things you have to add into aquaponics. So the beauty of this whole setup is, because I've been doing this for a long time, this is actually can be connected to a fish tank. So I purposely built the systems this way too, because if you decide one day that you don't want to continue using nutrients, you just have to add plumb on a fish tank to your same hydroponic setup. And that is where most farmers are going, because throughout the Caribbean, we're finding an issue too with the importation of nutrients, having a supply of nutrients all the time. So hydroponics is a good starting place, because the science behind hydroponics, once you know it and you can grow the crops, it'll be very easy if you want to add on the fish later. Right? But yes, it is something that worldwide is becoming a problem. Also, to give you guys some more education about hydroponics, hydroponics does better for certain crops. So we're going to go back into plants now. Okay, so this is my list here. Many plants can be grown. Leafy greens are the winners. Hydroponics, aquaponics, basically same plants. It's all about green stuff. Yet again, is better in hydroponics if you're doing fruiting crops, because you can add the nutrients to what they need to do. So eggplant, zucchini, tomatoes, peppers, you're going to get fantastic results with hydroponics because you're going to add specifically what those plants need. Not so good in aquaponics because you're limited by the fish and how much they can eat per day. So yes, fruiting crops are going to do very well in hydroponics.